Okay. Well, welcome everyone to our last SIG talk session. I'll start off with a karakia and then I will hand over to Anoushka. That's my karakia. Tūtara mai runa, tūtara mai rau, tūtara mai I roto, tūtara mai I wahu, kia tu ai ko te maritu, te mariora, ki te katawa, homi e, hui e, tati e. Stream session again. Okay, so I'll pass over to Anoushka to give us an update on the new RDA toolkit.
Great. Can I just check that you can still see my slides?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. For some reason, the green thing around the screen that I'm sharing has disappeared, but that's okay. Right. So hello again, everybody. I'm Anoushka. I look after one of the 3 cataloguing teams at the National Library of New Zealand. I'm here today with my National Library hat on rather than my SIG committee hat. And I'm here to talk about, we'll give you a brief update on the work the National Library has been doing to prepare to implement the changes to the RDA Toolkit, which is our core descriptive standard we use when we're describing the resources that our library collects. Now, just a reminder, when I'm talking about the new RDA Toolkit, I'm talking about the redesigned, reorganised version that you see when you go to the RDA Toolkit site now, and not the original RDA Toolkit, which was launched more than 10 years ago now. Sorry, excuse me. Right, so what I'll cover today is where we're up to with our preparations for moving to the new RDA Toolkit, a little bit about how we've been doing that work, and a little bit about our plans for 2023. I expect this is not going to be a long presentation. We should be done in about 20 minutes, and so there will be plenty of time for questions and discussion afterwards. Please do pop questions in the chat and as we go, and I'll catch them all up at the end, along with any new questions that you might have when I finished. Okay, so first, we were up to recently, we reached a very exciting milestone of having some policy statements added to the new RDA Toolkit. So a reminder what the policy statements are. RDA itself says what can be done, so you can use this element if you want to describe a resource. The policy statements, so the element may then have options that say that give you choices about what you might or might not do, and it's the policy statements which say definitely in a particular context, yes, do this, or don't do this. So the National Library has been developing a set of National Library policy statements to make it very clear at every option what we want our cataloguers to do or not do on each page. So this is a very exciting milestone for us, because for the last 2 and a bit years, we've been doing this work on a spreadsheet, and to finally have policy statements live in the toolkit means that we can actually see how it will work in real life, having those policy statements there. For the September release, we loaded a test set just to make sure that everything that we had thought was going to, so everything was going to work the way we had thought it was going to work. And the good news is it does. And so we've loaded approximately, well, actually 2,232 individual policy statements just for the manifestation entity, which is only 32% of the total to be loaded. But it was enough to give us a good idea of how the process would work. Okay, so if you're looking for them, there are 2 ways you can find them in the toolkit. You can click the link here in the Policies tab, and you can navigate to the National Library of New Zealand policy statements, and you can see them all laid out in one place. Or on any element page, and here I'm on the title proper element for the manifestation entity, you can select the National Library policy statements from the drop-down menu. If our policy statements aren't appearing in your drop-down menu, you may have to update the settings in your view So if I just pop back to the previous slide quickly, along the top you can see where you might click into your views, and you just pop in there and tick LIANZA policy statements, and then will pop up in your drop down. So we're up there with the British Library, the Library of Congress Program for Cooperative Cataloguing, and the Music Library Association, which makes us only the 4th institution to get policy statements in. Right, so continuing down the manifestation title proper element page, this is an example of what one of our policy statements looks like in real life. So you can see that the option tells you something, and then we've made a decision about when we would do that and what we do differently because of our local context in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So our aim for the policy statements in the new toolkit is to have a policy statement at every single option, so that a cataloguer coming to the toolkit is never in any doubt about what to do. In all cases, it will tell, you know, if I'm here, it will tell me, what do I do? This is what to do. So if you don't see any policy statements on a page in the toolkit at the moment it just means that we haven't loaded them yet, but the goal is that we will have comprehensive policy statements. If you continue down that manifestation title proper element page, you may see this phrase, this hyperlink, see LIANZA guidance. So the policy statement tells us what to do. It says apply this option, but how do I do it? So the LIANZA guidance gives details of how I do this in my specific context. So for me, that means, how do I put it in a MARC record in my library management system? So the guidance is very much like our original toolkit policies, like our attributes policy, our relationships policy, and our series and agents and series policy. Sorry. If you're familiar with those, you'll know that they have lots of examples, lots of context, lots of information. So our LIANZA guidance will replicate that information. At the moment, if you follow that hyperlink, you get to this temporary page. At the moment, our draft guidance is very drafty, but we do plan that the whole thing will be available along with all other supporting documentation we develop. It will be available freely and openly. So at the moment, we are organising it as a single document. It's organised by entity and element, and it is huge. At the moment, it's nearly 200 pages. It's very similar, as I said, to our current toolkit policy documents, but also very similar to Library of Congress's metadata guidance documentation. If you've had a look at the Library of Congress policy statements, you'll see they have a similar convention where the policy statement will say do or do not do this, and then a CMGD link, which takes you to their documentation, which gives the examples and the context and all that information. So in addition to this documentation, which is just covering, you know, our guidance, we do expect that we will develop some format-based documentation too, to help the cataloguer, or help me if I'm cataloguing a particular format, for example. So if I'm cataloguing a DVD and I want to know, what do I need to do if I'm cataloguing this DVD? What elements do I need? What do I need to think about? We plan to have documentation that's also very similar to documentation we have in the original toolkit, which has everything you need to do in one place to make it easy to see the pathways. So then I'd like to talk a little bit about how we got here. There's been quite a lot of work. Now this next slide, some of you who were here last year may remember this. Don't try and read it. It's just to give you an idea of how we're doing the work and the scale of what it looks like behind the scenes. It's vast and detailed spreadsheet, covering every single place in the new toolkit where we might want to put a policy statement. So there are over 3,000 elements to choose from in the new toolkit, and each one of those has many options. And each of those options needs to have a policy statement. So in order to manage this, we have a tab for each entity, and on each tab, entity tab, we have a line for each option for each element with a unique identifier which lets us match the policy statement with the correct option. So it's been a lot of work over the last 2 and a bit years. We have had a team here of 10 cataloguers, each committing between 6 and 8 hours a week, both directly to the policy statement work of reviewing our existing policy and fitting it into the new toolkit, but also diving deep into the structure and concepts and deeper ideas in the toolkit to make sure that we all understand it really thoroughly. So getting our policy statements into the toolkit, this is also not intended for you to read. It's just to give a little idea of what's going on behind the scenes. So with so many policy statements to put into the toolkit, it would take us years if we had to do it manually. But thankfully, we haven't had to add them one by one. Our metadata workflow specialist has written a script that takes the policy statements out of that spreadsheet, wraps it in an XML markup that's used by the content management system that supports the RDA toolkit, and then loads them to that content management system in bulk. Just magic. So we are going to only use this method while we're getting everything in, and then anticipate that manual tweaking and updating will be the way we do it from then on. So progress. This is where we're sitting right now, which is reassuring that we are actually making progress, even though it has been slow at times. We have calculated that we require a total of 7,150 policy statements. We have made 5,044 so far, which is around 71% of the total. So most of what is left, you'll be unsurprised to know, or guess, is left in the work and manifestation entities. We still have work to do on policy statements in the guidance chapters because there are options there as well. And then the bits and pieces that are just left at the end of any project, which just need a lot of, just need mopping up. Right, so the next steps for us. This is looking ahead to the end of this year and into next year. So I think this is the 3rd year in a row I've shared a draft timeline, and the dates have drifted significantly. It has taken a lot longer than we had anticipated, both because of the work and of course everything that's happened in the world over the last 2 years. But as we get more of the work completed, it is starting to feel like we can be a little bit firmer about our dates now, because we know of the work that's still to be done, what that really looks like in terms of time. So at the moment, this is our plan. And I've stressed that this is the plan at the moment. So looking ahead in immediate future, the next toolkit release is mid-December of this year. And for that, we are planning to load as many of the remaining policy statements that we've completed to the toolkit. So that will be a lot. And it's unclear exactly how many at the moment, but that's our plan, as many as we can possibly do for this next release. The next release after the December release is March 2023, and we would hope that we would be able to load everything that we didn't quite get to finish this year in the March release. And then at that point, if we have all our policy statements done, and we have our guidance documentation done, and we have our format-based documentation done, then we are in a position then to be able to say we can see a definite date from which we will start using the new toolkit. Just a reminder, we're still using the original toolkit, and we will continue to use it until we are really ready to shift. So, oops. Right. Sorry. Right. Before we implement, we need to finish our policy statements, which I've talked about, our associated documentation, and make sure that is in a really useful, ready to use state. And then we've got an application profile to make. So the application profile is just like an overview of what to expect in our metadata. So a summary essentially of which elements we always use, which elements we never use, which elements are core for us, which are optional. We made the choice early on to work on our policy statements first. There are other institutions who have chosen to do it the other way. They've been playing with application profiles before working on policy statements, and that's fine. That's a valid approach. But for us, we felt that we needed to really work through all of the policy statements, be very clear what it is we do and don't do. And then from the work that we've done, it's actually easy to pull out application profile information from that spreadsheet. So once we've done everything else, the application profile will be able to be pulled out and shared. Right. So further resources, I always like to give a plug for the RDA Toolkit YouTube channel, because they do put up lots and lots of free stuff, and free is good. There is a very good video I would really highlight, a recent video about getting a handle on the concepts and jargon in the new toolkit. It was done at, I think it was done at a library conference in North America not that long ago. And it's just an hour, and it gives a really good overview. If you haven't been in the toolkit for a while and want to start looking back at, what the new toolkit looks like, that video is a great place to start. And there's also a new concepts playlist, which breaks down some of those new and different concepts in the new toolkit just into short, like 8 to 12 minute videos, and then you can just watch it over and over and over until it becomes more familiar. There are also textbooks being published. Chris Oliver updated her textbook, Essential RDA, or RDA Essentials, recently, and there's going to be an RDA handbook written by Kate James, is going to be published by A&R Publishing shortly. I'll also say something about the RDA Lab series, which is being run, has been run again this year and is likely to be run again next year. It is expensive. I will acknowledge that it is quite expensive, but it is worth it for helping you really get to grips with the new ideas and the new structure and the new way of thinking and the new toolkit. And it is a workshop style series. It's not just video lectures. It is actually an engaging workshop style program, which does help you, really dig into things and practice. So then the last slide, are there any questions? I'm always really happy to talk about RDA policy statements and the work that we're doing at the National Library. And so we can have questions here, or if you think of something later, just email me. I'm really happy to, if you email me directly at my email address there, or the nzmb@dia.gov.nz mailbox, which is a mailbox that's monitored by the cataloguing teams at the National Library, which is a good place if you've got any questions about any of the cataloguing decisions or mistakes we've made, or questions.
There's a couple of questions in the chat, Anoushka.
Okay, hang on, I'll just open up the chat and have a look. Right, okay, so yeah, absolutely. I can post a link to that YouTube video. Yeah, well, actually, if you look in, I think I linked to it in the last Catapult, the last issue of Catapult, which was August this year. And the, I think on page 2, the ORDAC update, I think I'd captured in there the link to that YouTube video in particular. The second one. Okay, so the next question, do you indicate in the toolkit if we do not apply an element at all, especially as we don't yet have an application profile? Yes, some elements we do have, we've made a definite call, we aren't going to use this element. And for those, we've put a policy statement at the pre-recording heading on an element page that will say either we don't use this element at all, or we don't use this element but see this other element. We're still working out the best way to do it because we haven't added that statement on every single element, and a lot of that will be captured in the application profile. But yeah, we have been putting policy statements at the pre-recording heading that says essentially don't go any further. You're not in the right place. Okay, so have you undertaken any sort of mapping between the new toolkit elements and MARC? We haven't yet done a formal, it would be nice to have like a formal complete overview. And we haven't done that yet, but it's a bit like the application profile in that as we've worked through the policy statements and we then look at the associated guidance, and we're talking about how now we've decided we've recorded this element and it's going to be an unstructured description. Where do we put it in our MARC record? So we are capturing that information, although we know which MARC fields we use, and I think that is a piece of work later that would go back through what we've done and just pull everything together. That's also probably going to end up in our format-based documentation as well, because our current format-based documentation does include which MARC field each element we use to record each element. So kind of yes, but not in a comprehensive, cohesive way yet. And then Kylie, oh, thank you, Kylie. Yes, thank you for posting that link to the video. Right. So are there any other questions? Feel free to just speak up if you like. I might stop sharing and then I can see everybody. Nice. Oh, it's nice to hear that you've started the other way. You started that Renata saying that started with the application profile and MARC. I don't know about achievable. Doing it bottom up, it's a lot of slog. But again, I guess once we've done it once, it's done. So, no other questions?
There's a
right, as I said, I'm very happy if you email me. I want to have a chat.
There's one more question about will the National Library be offering any training?
Oh yeah. I can say that we will definitely be offering all our training resources that we develop for our internal training. But at this stage, I can't say that we'll be offering. Well, if you mean training that takes people through the whole process of how to catalogue using the new RDA toolkit, I'm not sure that we will. We definitely will make all of our internal training documentation available, and we definitely will be continuing to support the SIG in any way possible, doing more webinars and events especially next year as it gets more, you know, it gets closer to implementation, we will definitely be doing what we can. Maybe if I just, I mean, because I'm curious, what would training look like? I mean, Joanne, if you're asking us about training, what kind of training are you thinking of? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can see doing some kind of presentation that would dive, like, especially once all of our policy statements up and our documentation is up and, you know, all our associated documentation up, running a session similar to this, where one of us from the National Library of New Zealand maybe just demonstrates exactly how we negotiate or navigate through the toolkit and our documentation while we're doing our cataloguing. I'd say that would be very, very useful, or maybe very useful. The on the RDA Toolkit channel, which I'll plug yet again, there is a new Toolkit demo video that's worth having a look at. Again, that's just, I think it's just an hour, and that gives you a good overview and introduction to how you navigate the basic navigation of the toolkit and how to, you know, to find things and use things. So go and have a look at that. That's really good, and it's just been posted. But definitely, I'll put on my list that we should have a New Zealand specific one next year.
Okay, don't know if we've got any more questions coming through. Seems to be it for the moment, but yeah, as Anoushka said, if you have any more questions, post them on the CAT-SIG list or email them to Anoushka. So if it's something that will be interest to everyone, that'd be a great way of doing it. Okay, so I will finish off the meeting with a karakia, if I can find it again. Kia wa, having fun today. Ka waka I raa aki ki tapu ki runa. Kia wa tia ai te ara kia turuki whakataha ai. Kia turuki whakataha ai hunie huie taitie. Well, thank you everyone for coming along to these sessions. I hope you found them useful. We will look at doing something similar next year, hopefully with a few more more workshopy things as we've done. We will try and send out a feedback form so we can get some ideas on topics and what sort of things people would like to hear. Thank you.